Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Oh my God.
Tim, wait up! You're running too fast!
It's those damn aliens. Tim, they got me again. They just threw me back onto the ground after examining me for the last 2 hours. Or was it 2 days? You know, I don't even know. I've got these marks all over my body. Gosh, they've got to stop doing this. There's only so much that I can possibly handle of this alien abduction phenomena. But tonight is not the night to stop, Tim, is it? Hey, Tim, how are you out there in Jasper, Indiana?
Well, the aliens had me for more than a week, Tim, and I just finally got away.
Well, you know, I was wondering why I hadn't heard from you. Somebody in the family was taken away or got married, or...
Yes, I had my niece got married last week, and I was extremely honored to be the officiant at her wedding. So we had a very nice time in Florida, and now back again for more Exploring the Bizarre.
Well, you know, if you're going to get married, which I never have, I would think that Florida would be an excellent place to go to tie the knot. Although I kind of like the Virgin Islands myself. It's kind of exotic and a little bit further away from the hustle and bustle of Miami Beach, you know, and all of that. But I guess that's just because I'm a world and otherworldly traveler, as you can tell. I've been all over the universe, but not as far as our guests have been. So, Tim, why don't you introduce who we're going to be speaking with this evening, and welcome them into our chamber.
Why, of course, Tim. With us tonight is Peter Robbins, who has been on our show before, several times, numerous times. So it's always great to have Peter on with us. And with Peter, we're very happy to have with us Kate Thorvaldsen. Now, Kate is Norwegian-born, and she's a multimedia artist and is an experiencer. And she's had unusual experiences all of her life, which I think she has written that her first encounter happened at the age of 3. And she feels that she could be a hybrid of sorts, and has 25 symmetrical implants all over her body, supposedly from her interactions with ultra-terrestrials. So, Kate, Peter, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre. So happy to have you with us.
Well, you know, the reason that I paired the guest up this evening, I met Kate for the first time. Of course, I've known Peter for a long time. Kate, Kate, I met several weekends ago in Pine Bush, New York, where she was speaking and telling people about her experiences. And I know very little about what she has undergone. That is why we have with us tonight Peter Robbins, because Peter Robbins not only has had UFO experiences of his own in New York as well as in the UK, but he was also Budd Hopkins' assistant for a number of years. So if anybody knows about the ins and outs of abductees and experiencers, it would be Mr. Robbins. And Peter, thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for introducing us to Kate. Now, I'm wondering where to begin. Why didn't you give us a little bit about your background with Budd Hopkins? How exactly did you meet Budd, and how is it that he selected you to be his assistant?
Well, good evening, Tim, and Tina, and hi, Kate. To kind of get things on a level playing field here, you and I have known each other for, 800 or 900 years.
Oh, easy.
Yeah, and for me, one of the most welcome aspects of doing this work, which I find challenging, as important as any investigative work that is can be done, is actually, for a lot of people, it's somewhat anxiety provoking. And I enjoy doing your guys' show because it's always informed by a certain amount of humor. But these subjects that we're really talking about are not at all funny. They are transcendently life-changing. They're extraordinarily challenging, and I have always felt, since even before I began to work with Budd, that those witnesses, experiencers, abductees who have the courage to become public people in this work not only should have our gratitude, but our respect and our attention. As you know, Tim, because you're also a friend of my dear late sister Helen, my involvement in this field began 40 years ago, literally turning on a dime from my career as a New York painter to becoming an essentially full-time investigator, full-time, part-time, of this phenomena. That my interests in the whole UFO phenomena stem from my interest with and obsession with, certainly for years, with people who, like my sister, have been taken, returned, or have confronted these other intelligences directly. You're correct in characterizing that I have had experiences, but my experiences, dramatic as they've been to me, have been really in the form of sightings, one with kind of a caveat to it with Helen, and then the one that I had in the UK with my former co-author on Left at Eastgate, Larry Warren, in February of 1988. So from early 1975, I started to read, try to inform myself, but I was very cautious about connecting with people who said that they took it seriously too. Everybody knows that anybody who's a grown-up who takes flying saucers and little green men seriously is crazy. I mean, look at yourself, for example.
Well, I'm sitting here with a tin foil on my head right now.
Exactly. But it was about a year after that I happened to be going by a newsstand in our beloved Manhattan, and I did a double take because there was a feature article on a UFO incident that had occurred the year before on the cover of all publications, The Village Voice, which back then was a weekly that had nothing to do with UFOs, progressive, possibly even might be described by using the dreaded L word, and I don't mean lesbian, although that's
that's in there too. Yes, yes.
And I bought it and I took it home and read it. Up until that time, I had read a number of books, as well as article clippings, almost all of them from tabloids like the National Enquirer. And I had never actually read an actual well-done investigation that was grammatically correct and, in fact, brilliantly put together. It was written by a man named Budd Hopkins, Budd spelled with 2 Ds. At the time, all my life was about was living, eating, and breathing the New York art scene. And in the back of my mind, I remembered seeing the work of a late period abstract expressionist at a group show sometime before that named Budd Hopkins. I wanted to talk to this guy as I finished the article, and went to my copy of the now long defunct giant monster New York City phone book. There's only one Budd Hopkins in a book with two D's or one. And I called him and introduced myself as a fellow painter, teaching at the School of Visual Arts, showing my work downtown, who had had a UFO sighting the year before, and a sister who claimed to have been taken and returned. Bud's first question to me had nothing to do with UFOs or my sister. He wanted to know what kind of art I did. I was from the school, at that time, earthworks, minimalism, conceptual art, and he was less than impressed. He was a genuine old school painter, but he was pleasant and certainly polite, wanted to know more about the sighting and even more about my sister's incident. And that was how I first got invited over to have coffee and a talk with him at his wonderful home on West 16th Street. It was a life-changing afternoon for me, although I didn't realize it at the time. Over the next 35 years, I probably had several hundred cups of coffee at that table and more than my fair shares of shots of scotch. And we talked about art, life, and UFOs. This was 5 years, Tim, before Budd had published his first UFO book. That came out in 1981, and it changed the course of UFO studies in America and the world. It was called Missing Time, and it dealt with just that phenomena where a loss of memory, often coming in at about 90 minutes, ultimately was seen as a clear indication of a UFO abduction incident. After the book was published, and the term became something of a household term, if somebody says to another person, missing time, most people in our culture understand that it's referring to the UFO phenomena and not that you lost some time somewhere. After the book came out, he was inundated with calls, letters, this is well before email, and needed some help. We had become friends over the preceding years, seeing each other every couple of months. And I knew this was going to be important work. And I thought it might give me a leg up on helping me and my sister understand what had happened to her. Also, the fact that we had other things in common, a love of the arts, travel, our wonderful city, literature, etc., made him comfortable with me and me comfortable with him, and we fell into something of a routine. I witnessed many hypnotic regressions, had the privilege of sitting in on many interviews with abductees and taking case histories, meeting with them and their families, and developed, I think, a pretty good rapport in such situations. Finally, in 1987, his international bestseller, Intruders, was published and really put him on the map. After that, the calls, the visits, the news folks, interviews, invitations to speak just shot through the roof. And at a certain point, it became a very full-time, part-time job. And that is how I met Budd.
Well, why don't you tell us then, Peter? Then how did you meet Kate, and where that went from?
Yes, good question, Tim. Kate and I met where any nice American would go to meet a Norwegian woman, which was southern Brazil.
Of course.
Exactly. I didn't even have to say it. I was speaking at a conference there, one of the great conferences sponsored by my dear friend and colleague, A.J. Javard. And Kate came along with a friend of hers, Erling. What's Erling's last name, Kate?
Strand.
Erling is one of Norway's most respected UFO researchers, and he gave what I felt was a very grounded and really quietly brilliant paper on the statistics surrounding UFO sightings in a certain concentrated area in Norway. Kate and I talked. She told me some of what had happened to her. And of all of it, one of the things that fascinated me most about her experiences was that they seemed to have left her with knowledge of a subject she had never trained in, studied, or had any background in. Now, working with Budd over the years, I was familiar with cases where people, and I don't see this as some mystical thing of the aliens gave me this power, and in some cases, that may be the case. But sometimes when you have these experiences, a low-lying talent makes its way to the surface. A good example is Mike Rogers, who is Travis Walton's best friend and the crew chief of their logging crew at the time of his famous abduction. It was Mike behind the wheel of that truck that night who made the decision to drive away from that site, something which Travis has always agreed was the right thing to do, but caused tremendous stress and consternation for Mike later on in life. If you look at a copy of the Travis's outstanding book, Fire in the Sky, that is illustrated, all those illustrations in that book, and they're all very professional, were done by Mike Rogers, who never studied art. Mike felt it was just something that came up that he wanted to develop and did. But with Kate, it was different, because what her knowledge was that nothing else could account for was in a very specific area of physics. So much so that she was in correspondence with physicists and was already working on a book about physics, which she will have out, I would guess, either, if not by the end of this year, sometime next year. This fascinated me as somebody who was dyslexic, and as they used to say in my day, bad at math. I still spin sixes and nines around and have to check my figures. This was something absolutely remarkable. Well, after meeting in Brazil, we continued to stay in contact. And last year, when I told her that I was going to be speaking at a conference in Glasgow, Scotland, she decided to join me there and met some of my colleagues and friends in UFO studies there. We had a chance to spend more time together and see some of that great city. And more recently, I guess you could say I acted as her sponsor in part to bring her to America so that she could give her very first talk at an American UFO conference. And Tim Beckley, of course, heard that last month in Little Pine Bush, New York. And it was a great talk. And Kate is, for me, one of the most unique people in this field. We didn't know that. I didn't know this in Brazil. I don't think Kate knew it even at that time. But as Tim said earlier in the show, scans have revealed, I think the count is 25 symmetrically placed implants just below the skin. You can see them as small circular discs in these scans. And I have to add here, for anybody in the audience that, you're sitting there in the armchair and nodding your head and smiling slightly, there's no contesting this. This is the real deal. They are just below the skin. More, small magnets stick to them. And that is without any aid. And as Kate has wisely informed people in demonstrating them, these are best done after you wash your face and dry it, so that, no skin oil or, body oil or whatever will assist them in sticking. Another thing that impressed me about, and it's funny, you catch yourself with language. to use the word case, which we do so often in this field, depersonalizes things to such a degree sometimes, because every case involves very real people, many of whom are at effect of these experiences. Kat, for me, is not. She is comfortable in her own skin. People have suggested to her or asked her, why don't you remove these things? As far as she is concerned, as she will, of course, articulate, they're there for a reason. And, why cut into yourself because you're paranoid that, there's something there that shouldn't be there if it is not causing any problem and may, in fact, be an asset, even though you do not know the specifics of it. So that's really our background. And I just think the world of her, and I am so glad that we had a chance to meet and continue on this road. But I think at this point, unless either of you guys have any additional questions, we should turn this over to her.
Well, we will. We're just a couple of minutes until our bottom of the hour break, and then when we come in, we'll do this. But I just wanted to make a comment real quick before we went to the break. You talked about how some of people who've had these abductions experiences come back, enhanced. Really would be like a word, possibly with an interest in mathematics or physics or music even. And I just read an article not too long ago that was referring to people who have had traumatic experiences, head injuries, similar cases like that, who have had then come out of it with just extreme mathematic abilities and things like that. But before I'll let anybody comment on that, we are going to go to our bottom of the hour break, and when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Peter and Kate on the mighty Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
And welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we are talking with Peter Robbins, Peter, and Kate Thorvaldsen. And Kate, you and Peter were in the Pine Bush UFO Festival not too long ago, where you talked to the audience. What was your reaction there in Pine Bush? I mean, were people interested in what you had to say?
Yeah, I must say that they were very interested in the subject, and especially when I was starting to demonstrate the magnets.
Mm-hmm. But why don't we start at the beginning, and we'll get to the magnets in a little while. When was your? I mean, okay, you've had these experiences; they've lasted most of your life, as I understand. But when did they start, and under what circumstances, Kate?
I was actually just 3 years old. It was almost Christmas, and my mother, she has been putting me to bed, and left the room. And I remember I was standing in the crib and standing there watching in the dark, and I wasn't tired. I didn't want to go to sleep. And looking in the room and looking out the window, and I don't know for how long I was standing there like that, but suddenly, out of nowhere, not a sound, nothing, there was coming this little gray creature just gliding through the wall, coming in through the wall from my left side and gliding over the floor, and then it was standing in front of me, of the crib. And it was just a little bit taller than me. And
you're sure it wasn't one of Santa's elves?
Funny you should say that, because in my I have been told by my mother that Santa Claus would be coming soon, and in my little head I put the word Santa on this little creature.
Love it.
So I believed it was actually Santa that was standing there, and
okay,
I was trying to say something, but in my way, but I understood very quickly that words wasn't necessary. So we were standing there looking at each other and had a communication between our heads, and it just gave me the expression, the feeling that he was there to check upon me to see if I was okay. And and after a little while, then he was just gliding the same way he was coming out through the wall again. And a few seconds later, then I saw this creature together with another one inside a craft in front of the window, and we were living at the second floor. And there was no possibility that there were light from the cars or anything, because I could actually see the craft. I could see them in front of the window, and then it just take off. And the next day,
I mean, I realize you're only 3 years old, and it's a long time ago. But do you remember what the craft looked like?
A little bit. It's difficult to explain, but I have recognized it when I have seen something similar to it later.
Well, no, what about the creatures? I mean, did they look like like what we know now as the stereotypical, gray with the big eyes and big head, that sort of thing?
Yeah, they were small, and this one was a little bit taller than me when he was standing in front of the crib, and he had these huge black eyes. So yeah, and I remember that the next day I was telling my mother that, I have met Santa Claus, and of course they didn't pay any attention to it because they were thinking, okay, yeah, right. And a few days later there was actually the Christmas, and I remember my mother, she was picking me up, carrying me on her arm into the TV room, because now I was supposed to meet Santa. And I was, I'm going to meet Santa again. And that creature that was meeting me in the TV room, that wasn't Santa. That was some person dressed up in red suit and a fake beard and a false plastic face. And I was screaming my head off. I was terrified. I didn't like that Santa. Give me my Santa back. So yeah, I remember it very well.
How ironic that the Santa that's supposed to make you happy actually terrified you, as opposed to something really strange that came into your room. Yet you found that to be a pleasant experience.
Yeah, I did. Because that creature was not giving me anything else than a good feeling. And like I said, he was there to check if I was okay.
Well, why would he think you were not okay? I mean, why? I mean, do you think is there a reason that why out of everybody living in the town where you live would they pick you, Kate?
Yeah, that has been a long life question. Why did he come just to my place and ask me to see if I was okay? And I think that over the years, maybe I have to be something that they have been working on from before with my mother, or I don't know. The possibilities are there.
Yeah. They've never told you why they're coming?
No, they haven't.
Have you asked them?
I think that probably not. I haven't been asking them. I think that they have been left that over to me, that I had to walk that road that everyone else has to do to find out who they are and so on in their life.
Okay, so you're 3 years old, and you've had these beings pass through the wall. Now that's a pretty common denominator in abduction experiences. Peter, how many cases have you heard of where these beings have come through walls or doorways or windows or roofs or cars or what have you?
Quite honestly, more than I can recall, Tim, but I would say conservatively several hundred easily.
Easy, right? Probably a good 25% of all the cases, if not more. I would guess. I mean, that's
more.
Yeah, more. Okay, Kate. So you've had this experience at 3, and you decided you like the aliens better than Santa and myself. I was stuck on Krampus, but that's another story. Okay, so did you tell your parents? Obviously, they thought that you were hitting the baby bottle too much or something, I suppose. but when was your next experience?
I was just 10 years old. In that time of life, there was a little bit tough, and very often I was crawling out on the roof at night when everyone else was going to sleep. And then I was going out there and sitting there on the roof and looking for the stars and having this big feeling inside me that I didn't belong here. I want to go home. Somewhere out there is my home. It's not here. And one night there was this big bright light over my head, and that's what I remember. And the next morning I was waking up in my bed. I was thinking, what? How did I end up here? And normally I was a typical normal girl at the 10 years old. I loved horses. I was drawing horses. I was talking horses. I was even breeding horses, I felt. And instead of drawing horses and talking about them, then I started to talk about aliens. I was even painting little gray aliens and talking about other life forms and planetary systems and all kind of stuff. So yeah, I remember the face of the teacher at the school. He was thinking that I was becoming nuts.
Did they get in touch with your parents and say this your daughter is obsessed with little beings?
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. But my mother, she kept one of the drawings I made when I was 10 years old, and so I still actually have it. That's fun.
And well, okay. So, but now on the second experience, was there any sort of communication with them?
Under our hypnosis, many years later, we found out what was happening. At that point, and that was very much the same that was happening when I had my last close encounter with them.
Well, so, tell us what happened to you under hypnosis. I mean, what did you recall?
I recall that there was taking me up to the craft and putting me on a table, and they have a lot of these kind of instruments that they was putting inside my nose and ears and so on, but it was particularly my nose, and I lost my smelling, my sense of smelling when I was 10 years old. So that was the physical difference after that visit. But yeah, it wasn't happening so much at that point that I remember, even from the hypnosis.
Now, were the on your second encounter, were they the same little beings that visited you on your first occasion?
Yeah, they were the same.
Identical.
Yeah.
Like clones, or were they the same? I mean,
they were the same. For me, they have never been clones or robots or anything like that.
So, in other words, you're meeting with the same, for lack of a better term, individuals.
Yeah.
And do they indicate to you where they might be coming from?
No, they didn't.
Do you think it's off-world, or is it a interdimensional thing, or how do you equate it in your own mind?
Maybe both.
I think that they are actually both, but I think that they are interacting with different kind of worlds. That because it's just our world is very much like a radio station. It's all about frequency. So you can very easily swap or swip, or what you're saying, it from one frequency to another. So that's why they are so easily to just disappearing too. So that's what they are doing. Now,
have there been when you've had these, how many experiences have you had up until now?
I have lots and lots of experiences with them, but I just have 3 close encounters, and it's especially the last one that was most heavy.
Okay, well, tell us about when was the last one, and how was it heavy?
I was 28 years old. I was going to stay in this cabin in the Ghoul Mountain. I was staying. It was almost 20 kilometers to next people, so I was really going to be alone out there and working on my book. And I was supposed to be there for 2 months, but I was just staying there for 1 week. So it was becoming a very short trip. I was going to bed at night and waking up next morning, and I had this. This was not a pillow mark. This was a big difference from a normal pillow mark. This was a mark like something metal, or like a fork that has been grabbing onto your face. And I can see this very clear marks over my eyes, and I had this greenish dried material from my nose and from one of my eyes. And my first reaction was, "Oh shit, I'm going to be sick or something," but I didn't. And the day went as normal. And when the evening was coming again, I was like a stressed animal in a cage because I knew something was happening, and I didn't remember why. So I think that I was reading the same magazine maybe 20 times that next night because I didn't dare to fall asleep. So I was getting in contact with those people that was owning the cabin. So the next day they was coming up and picking me up and brought me back to the society again. And it was when I was coming back, sorry, that we can really see the difference. Because when I was coming back, then you have all the electricity. You know what your mobile phone charger, if you're putting that in a wall, normally, your normal hearing, you can't hear it. And when I was putting my mobile phone in the wall, it sounds like a really, really bad microphone feedback that is really yelling at you. So it was really terrible. And I could hear light bulbs. I could hear all kind of mechanic stuff that was inside the music machines or whatever. And I needed to put the dots in my ears to get all the sounds down, even when people were talking. It was just too loud. And I remember my boyfriend at the time. He was the leader of UFO Norway. He was picking me up and brought me back down to the place where we were living. And for a long time ago, he was buying this perfume to me. I never sensed it, but I was putting it on just to please him. For myself, I never smelled it. So yeah, this time I was doing the same thing, going out to his office, just to turn around to walk inside again to wash it off. It was just too much. So my smelling was back too. So and the light sensitive, and yeah, even today I'm still light sensitive and can hear too much. When I'm coming to my friends' places and stay over, I always ask are there any clock in the room, and they're normally saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's not a tic-tac, it's an electrical clock." Okay, so what? When I was staying in London, in my friend's place there, we had to take out the clock and even put out the electricity in the wall. Then it was quiet enough. So yeah.
Well, now, why do you think that is, though? I mean, that's a peculiar reaction to an encounter or a contact like this.
Yeah, and after that we were finding this guy in Oslo that was a doctor that was doing hypnosis and regressions. Mm-hmm. And he was putting me under there under hypnosis, and then we find out that I had gone to bed at night, and then suddenly there was this bright light in my bedroom, and there was one of these tall grays, not the small ones, but it was one of the tall ones that was picking me up, bringing me into the fireplace, that big room. I can't say the TV room because there was no TV there, but yeah, living room. And there was this 2-3 small grays that start working on me. I was like floating in the air, and they were standing around me, and they was putting this helmet on me, and there were these big needles going into my ears, and this fork thing look-alike that was going into my nose, and I always been never touch my nose.
Now this didn't frighten you? I mean, if somebody came along and took me into a room, and I don't even like to go to the doctors, I mean, or the dentist. I would be peeved as hell about this. I don't think I would look forward to my next encounter.
When I was at that point, it wasn't pleasant, it wasn't nice, but I was getting the feeling that they were not doing it to hurt me in any way. I'm comparing it like a dentist hour. You are doing it because it's necessary, and it's not always needed to be pleasant. But I remember that when I was coming to a certain point, then I remembered what happened when I was 10 years old. And from that moment, I asked them, please don't let me remember anything else. And from that moment, everything was gray, completely gray. My whole memory was wiped out. And this guy that the hypnotist, he was working on me for 2 hours and trying to get a hold on that gray area, but he couldn't. So, yeah.
Well, don't you think though that okay, if this has been going on, all these years, that by this time they would have if they're looking for DNA or your blood pressure or whatever it is that they're looking for, don't you think that they would have a grasp on that by now?
Maybe that's why I haven't been seeing them for some time, because they have already the monitoring in place, or a very. Yeah, I like to joke about the magnet, not the magnets, but the implants. That is a very hyper modern GPS system, so they know where to track me because I'm difficult to track.
Well, do you think that they have implanted you with some device?
I don't know. It looks like they have been doing it, because I didn't know about this for years, because this happens back. This close encounter had happened in when I was 28. It's so many years ago. It's before 2000. And actually now it was just in 2016, January last year, I found out that I had implants. Of course, over the years, I've been thinking that maybe I have someone, maybe I don't. I'm a little bit lazy on this area, because I'm actually not interested in the UFO stuff. It's just a part of my life.
Mm.
And,
where would we find the implants?
I have two in the. My English is not that good, but always I'm struggling for the words. Maybe Peter can explain that easier for me, because he knows where they are sitting.
The implants that have been documented in Kate's body run down her spine, and kind of almost like a necklace along the collarbone area, and then up by the sinus area, and they are symmetrical. It's the damnedest thing. And I have seen, images of parts of the scan, and there they are. They're perfectly round. And where one is on one side, another one is on the other. It's so blatant, and it's so incontrovertible. There is no possibility, and let me be blunt here, of fraud or any type of shenanigans. Also bear in mind, I guess there are people, in fact, I know there are, who, because of their makeup or their needs or who knows what, have a need for attention. This is not the way most people would look for attention. Aside from these things, if Kate had not had these experiences, she is a professional artist. She is a citizen of Norway. She has had many regulation life experiences. This is not the way a well-balanced person would want to become well-known. And I do consider Kate a very well-balanced person. This is just another aspect of her life. And I think she handles it with a great deal of class. And it's not, the obsessive. You understand.
Yeah. Well, now let me ask you this, Peter. Getting back to your work briefly with Budd, and people
brief.
have been.
It wasn't brief.
Okay, but people have been critical, of hypnosis, and all the things, the negative stuff that you can bring out, and that can be the case in some instances. Would you say that? Were there people that came in to see you in Budd that you just eliminated automatically because they were not well grounded, or you felt that their experiences might be of some other nature than a physical alien abduction?
Certainly. However, they were very much in the minority. Also, Budd, who was such a good investigator, had he been a police detective, God help the criminal element, his deductive reasoning, his logic, his not jumping to conclusions, I thought were superb. He established early on that while somebody might fake this kind of experience, statistically, over the years and decades, we observed as well as we could in any kind of subjective way that it was extremely rare. However, at the same time, we dealt with people who we were convinced, and there was every kind of supporting evidence to back up, had been through these kind of experiences, who were highly neurotic, who were occasionally alcoholics, or, had other life problems that represented statistically the general public at large. But, when you think about it, I remember several really pronounced cases, and they, again, were in the minority. One where an individual who they got a kick out of it. Their intention was fully to deceive. And
Peter, I'm going to have to interrupt you here, unfortunately, because we are coming to our top of the hour break. We will continue this conversation with Peter and Kate on Exploring the Bizarre. So please stay tuned for more.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Oh, and we're so glad that you're back with us on Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tim Beckley is waiting in the wings, in the darkness, in the shadows, waiting for his chance.
Well, I paid my electric bill. This shouldn't be happening. I swear, but be careful. We tell people to go to the chat room, but be careful because I think Peter's in there now. He's never been in our chat room before, not that I have either. So treat him with kindness.
Rest easy, America. I didn't find my way in.
But you send him back to us when you have finished whatever you care to be doing in the chat. What goes on in the chat room? Well, I'll wait till later to find out, I guess. Tim, what say we? I mean, you've never had an abduction experience, right?
As far as I know, no. I mean, I have not even, I've seen a few lights in the sky, but unfortunately, I have never actually even had a bona fide UFO sighting. And it's funny because I have gone out to locations, with groups, where they do UFO hunts, and you're like, oh, this location, we see UFOs all the time, and I go out there with them, and I can always tell, because I've trained myself for these things that people are seeing satellites, planes with their landing lights on, that sort of thing, and I'm never invited back again.
Yet when somebody like Paul Eno goes out, he's not only seeing mysterious lights in the sky, but Bigfoot is closing in on him. I mean, we've got these window areas now in certain parts of the country. Of course, Pine Bush being a very active area going back to the 1980s, where all kinds of mishigash was taking a place in the country there. I mean, they had some wild experiences. Did you know, Peter? Did you know Ellen Crystal?
I did. She was a good friend. I miss her.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Her. She lived next door to Steven Tyler.
Oh, gosh.
From Aerosmith.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. And you know how I know that? She sent me a photograph of her and Steven Tyler together, which I ran in UFO Universe, and I had a terrible proofreader.
Oh no!
And we misspelled Steven Tyler's name and Aerosmith too.
No!
Oh my gosh!
You missed your chance.
I did indeed. But well, that it is what it is. We partied with some of the greats of rock and roll, some of whom unfortunately are passing away now. I just we're losing like band members right and left here. I suspect, and it's sad. It's very, very sad. But,
yeah.
Hey Tim, we've got a question in the chat room, but I think that before we ask that question, I'd like to know from Kate about how she got the idea in the first place to use magnets in I don't know, in search of her implants, or just on a whim, or just exactly how that came about.
Yeah, it wasn't my idea, actually. Over the years, as I said, I have been thinking that maybe I have an implant, maybe I don't, but it hasn't been so much in my mind, actually. But a friend of mine, Sid Goldberg from Canada, he was working on a case there, and they were trying magnets on this person, and the magnets was sticking. So he was the one that was telling me, why don't you buy these magnets and try it on yourself? Because I knew that I had this little triangle-shaped little thing on my neck. So I was thinking, okay, why not? I can do that. So I was buying the magnets, and one thing is to think that you maybe have implants, and maybe it will stick, to the feeling that it actually is sticking. That's a big wow. So yeah, and then I had a friend over, and he said, since your nose has been closed all the time, why don't you try it on your nose too, just for fun? And the magnets were sticking there too. So, okay, then we have 2. And then it was 3. So then we was thinking, okay, why don't we take a little research? So we were going over my whole body with the magnets. And of course we was prepared, we were preparing it for it. So I needed to be not sweat, not too cold, just normal temperature as possible, and clean skin, so it would not be oily or anything. Right. So because if it is, then it can easily stick. And then we found 25 places, symmetrical placed. And if you put the magnets just even a half centimeter outside from that point, it will fall off. So it was a big wow.
Well, now, how big are the magnets that you use? I mean, what kind of magnets are we talking about?
Let me see. I never remember the name for it. Neodymium.
We know them very well.
Yeah, let me jump in here for a moment.
Yes.
They're small. I would say they're at most half an inch across, fairly flat. Just small circular flat magnets.
Well, we will have this on YouTube. We will have photos. And,
so it's like rare earth magnets.
Oh, I don't know about that, but
that's the term for a certain kind of small, powerful magnets. You can buy them like in Amazon, something like they're called like rare earth magnets. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now, Kate, why do you think? I've heard of stories, and I've seen people like on Ripley's Believe It or Not. You can put a spoon and it'll stay on their chest, or some other. They're like a human refrigerator or something like that, where everything sticks to them. I mean, does this, do you think, have something to do with your contacts, or is it just a peculiar gift that you have?
Side effect?
I don't know. For me, it would be. For me, it's natural to believe that they have been putting something there or done something. And but the strange thing is that the magnets, they are sticking on. It looks like they are following the meridian system. As of course, we are not finished with this case yet, because there are still a lot of questions that remains. So, and the answer to the questions that I saw in the chat room about why medical people haven't been looking at this, it is that since these are UFO related, most of the medical people, they are afraid to touch it, and those who will touch it, they will not leave their names out there. And we were, since my friend in UFO Norway, he has big connections area in Norway, and he knew this guy that was a chiropractor, and he had his own X-rays machines in that center. So I was coming in there, and they were not registering me or anything. They was just getting me in and quick out, taking the pictures and giving me the CDs. So they wouldn't dare to go out with it.
If I can jump in here, first, Tim, remember that if the magnets that Kate is referring to are like half a centimeter off the exact spot, they won't stick. There is that one area also regarding medical professionals and implants. Fear of ridicule is endemic, especially in fields like that. And it's still so strongly ingrained that it can impugn your reputation. I mean, we all know this. It's part of the culture. However, at the height of working with Budd, which I did on and off for about half of our friendship of 35 years, we had developed what we'd call a referral team of nearly 100 medical and mental health professionals, psychologists, psychiatric social workers, nurses, a handful of actual psychiatrists, every different kind of therapist, who very few of them public about their interest in the subject, but quite a number of them confiding to Budd and he to me that the reason they even got into the healing arts was because they were abductees or they were experiencers, and if it became public, they might lose their license to practice in their states. It's actually that ferocious. However, there are exceptions to the rule. And one of them, whose names that you know, Tim, is the late, great Dr. Roger K. Lear, who
Absolutely.
was a podiatric surgeon, a foot specialist. Roger became involved in this subject to such a degree that he basically threw caution to the winds as far as his public reputation went. He continued to do his professional work superbly, but he was a public person in the work until we lost him about 10 years ago to cancer. I considered Roger a dear friend, and he wrote, I think, 2 books. The one that I'm looking at right now, I would recommend that anybody with a serious interest in this subject, especially if you have a technical background or are a medical or mental health professional, that you add to your library. It's called The Aliens and the Scalpel. Whitley Strieber wrote a very fine foreword to it. And it's absolutely fascinating to approach and live this subject through Roger's courage, curiosity, and as you might suspect, he did remove quite a number of them from people at their request. I saw some of them, and we have a member of the research community, Daryl Sims. Implants are his specialty. I've seen ever so many scans of them, and most of them, not all, most of them break down into 2 different areas. They're either seemingly metallic-based or silicone-based. They're roundish, like a BB, or more like a grain of rice. One case that Roger really broke through some extraordinary information on revolved around the question of, everybody knows, you don't have to be a medical professional. If you have an infection, if you have a splinter, white blood cells will recognize it immediately and rush to the area. And if it is an infection, there will be a fight there. Why is it that with this whole history of implants, the body has always failed to recognize that fact, and that there's never a crisis at the site of the implant itself? Well, what Roger did, and hearing him talk about it in person was absolutely galvanizing, was establish that there was a very, very extraordinarily thin coating, but it was so tough that he couldn't cut it off with a surgical scalpel. It literally acted as a stealth protection the body never recognizes that these things are there. And that is an absolute fact, well documented by Roger in this book, a number of scientific papers. There are no active medical professionals right now who are fully out or out there as public people who have picked up the path that Roger pioneered. And they have my absolute understanding. And it's a damn shame that we live in a culture where this is still a level of potential ridicule that, for a layperson, you can, have your friends make fun of you. But if you're a medical or medical professional,
yes,
or an astronomer or what have you, you can be hounded to the point where you leave the work or are forced out as a kook or a quack, and your colleagues will never check the data because, as Kate very correctly pointed out, why bother? It's UFO stuff. I know it isn't real. If it was, we'd all know about it. And that's the logic we're still governed by.
I found that also, too, doing this book that just came out, the Matrix Control System of Philip K. Dick. He was pretty much ostracized by members of the science fiction community. Okay, but you laugh, but you know why? Because the higher ups in the science fiction field, like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury, who never investigated any of these cases in their life, would say, "Oh, there's absolutely nothing to any of this. You'll have to be an idiot to believe it." And of course, the peons and the masses who follow science fiction, who I have very little respect for, would say, "Oh yes, Arthur C. Clarke. Yes, Isaac Asimov. You know better than anybody else in the damn world." Yeah.
That
I need to take my blood pressure medication now.
Well, Tim, that Ray Bradbury actually once said that he was convinced that there was no such thing as UFOs because if there were, he said that somebody would have told him. How about that?
Well, I'll add to that, Tim. Doing what I do and speaking fairly regularly at conferences around the country and sometimes abroad, you would think in kind of an open, logical way that people who are serious fans of science fiction would at least be open-minded enough to embrace these possibilities, or imagine if it is real. I mean, say I'm a Star Trek geek or a Star Wars person or a Bradbury fan or whatever, that wow, there are these UFO books. I want to look at it. The ridicule is just as strong. And in fact, I had a very interesting experience just this past January. As you guys know, I'm associate producer of outstanding documentary called Travis, The True Story of Travis Walton, and have done any number of speaking dates with him at screenings, probably about 20 at this point over the past year and a half that the film has been available. In January, we were invited, our brilliant executive producer Jennifer Stein submitted the documentary to the Philip K. Dick Film Festival in New York City.
Well, and we just went to this year's event 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and we didn't cross paths there, but I was particularly interested in seeing this audience's reaction, and I mean seeing it because after it was over, we did a Q&A, and I was looking at these faces, and it was a showstopper for a lot of these people. I think for some of them, it really was a shock. That this case is so well documented that there's you really have to be in total denial to believe that it was made up or something. The proof is incontrovertible, and they expressed, a few of them, that up until that point it wasn't anything that they took seriously. I think in the same way that I think if 3% of dedicated American guys sports fans who go to the games and buy the jerseys and are involved in the world of their favorite teams, simply switch that intense curiosity and passion to the world of UFO studies, it could be a tipping point. The same thing for the millions of science fiction fans who are as convinced as their other counterparts that it can't be, therefore it isn't, therefore it's not my time, worth my time, and that's the impasse at the moment for many people.
Well, now this year's event, and we had the organizer was on our show about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
Jacques Vallée was one of the presenters there,
Wow.
and one of the main attractions was a short film that was done about Ingo Swann. So
right.
and Bob Hieronymus was there, and
good friend.
some of the old gang. So I found it actually refreshing that this group here did seem to, well, there certainly is a crossover, because if you read my book and anything else on Philip K. Dick, you realize that he was way ahead of his time. I mean,
Yes.
Physicists now are talking about dimensional universes and portals and string theories and all this stuff. And he, I don't know whether he coined the term, but he used the term the Matrix back in 1977.
Yeah.
He was giving a presentation for a science fiction convention in France, and he gave a press conference. And at this press conference, he announced all the weird things that had happened to him, and you could see the absolutely stunned and quizzical and bewildered looks of the people in the audience, just like you described, like, what is this guy on? And of course, he, in the case of Philip K. Dick, he might have been on a few things, but synchronicities I found are the gateway to this damn UFO and paranormal thing. I mean, I don't know what the explanation is, and I don't know if there's somebody up in the control panel there that's using a joystick, or whether the kids come on at 4:00 in the afternoon, at wherever they are, and take control of it, and then the parents find out 2 hours later and take the stick. I don't know. It's or maybe it was all programmed a million years ago at the beginning of creation, and they went away. I mean, that's kind of this what I kind of subscribe to, is that we're here and we got to take care of ourselves, man, because it doesn't look like anybody else. I mean, even the Space Brothers, they talk about enlightenment and the coming here to help us and all, and I don't see too many. They haven't put any money in my pocket for sure. They don't put food on the table. And I haven't had the opportunity to meet Sam Jossi. So I mean, what am I? What am I doing all this for? Except that every Thursday night we come into the KGOR studio here in Las Vegas. Well, I'm not in Las Vegas, but and sit around and we chat about this. But enough about that. I'm just let's see. We've got a break coming up in 2 seconds here, and then we will
2 minutes.
Be back. Yeah, 2 minutes, and then we will be back with the last segment of the show. And more questions are forthcoming to Peter and to Kate, and maybe we'll even throw a few out to Tim Swartz, who is anxious to answer all the questions that we have before us this evening. And we've got some great shows coming up in the future as well. And don't forget, you can find us on YouTube at Mr. UFO's Secret Files. And we're now on Stitcher, iTunes, and Google Play. And I don't know how to get to any of them, but you just have a great time. You can listen now with all 6 ears. And that's all that possibly matters. And on YouTube, we will see Kate with her magnets. And that's something we're looking forward to doing. And we will be right back, I think, Tim, in just a few minutes with the concluding episode of Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre, and here we are, Tim, once again, just less than a half hour left in the show. And I should note that we've been getting a lot of questions in our chat room, and Kate has been nice enough to go over there and has been chatting up and answering some of these questions. But I want to ask Kate just a couple of these questions on air so that our listeners can hear this as well. And one of them from Jeremy. Jeremy asked, does Kate have kids? And if so, have they had any experiences, sightings, abductions, wondering if they will follow family lines? Well, and not just kids, I guess, but I mean, any other members of your family, Kate, parents, grandparents, cousins, that sort of thing.
Yeah, actually, my grandfather, he never met them, but he saw the spaceship over Drammen, the place where they were living for many years ago. And my mother, she has also seen them. So yeah, you can say it runs to the family.
Well, and we've heard that before, haven't we, Peter, where there seems to be a generational thing when it comes to these kind of contacts.
Tim, back when serious investigation into the so-called abduction phenomena began, and that would have been in the late 1970s, the world of UFO studies was composed almost entirely of middle-aged geeky guys. And I understand that the fear of ridicule was such that you want to seem as unloopy as possible. And there was good cause to keep the study essentially confined to radar returns, analysis of alleged landing sites, charting statistics. As David Jacobs said at one point, the focus was on the cars and not the drivers. And the first understandable theoretical ideas around abduction was that the odds against it were so extreme that it was like getting hit by lightning. And if it had happened to you once, overwhelming odds it would never happen again. Not what we believe, not what we think, but the statistical data has borne out just the opposite. Namely, if it has happened to you, the likelihood is overwhelming that it has been happening to you on and off with whatever irregular or regular timing since you were very young, like Kat. And that it does run in families. They're literally following bloodlines. This was very unnerving to me when I first began to see the actual statistical data and talk in some cases. I remember, and always will, meetings and conversations at times with 3 generations in the same family when I was working with Budd, all of whom supported each other. I deal with people now where the children and one parent, almost overwhelmingly one rather than both, have this happen, and it causes a particular bond. Sometimes it can put great stress on families or on siblings or on a husband and wife, for all the reasons that as human beings we can understand. But the fact that Kat's grandfather and mother have an awareness and at least sighting experiences is completely unsurprising to me.
Well, what about now? Jeremy in the chat room again has asked: are there any scars near the implants that that you've discovered with your magnets? Is there anything on the surface of your skin that indicates that something has happened there?
Nothing at all.
And let me jump in here.
If there were any scar, of course, then I can just look for the scars, and then instead of searching my whole body with magnets.
And let me add here that in every legitimate case that I have ever investigated, that I'm aware that Budd or other leading researchers, and certainly Dr. Lear, there never are. When these implants are close to the surface, one logically would only deduce that it's subcutaneously introduced through a small slit or something. If that's the case, I mean, how we're stuck with our own reality. How they get in there is part of the mystery as far as I'm concerned. There should be something discernible. Perhaps they have the technology to make that opening, put it in, and then completely erase it with advanced medical technology or what have you. I remember one of the most memorable ones I ever saw was from an individual that Budd had been working with who had a round BB size foreign object in their brain. I don't remember what part of the skull, but I remember it was about an inch in, and it was completely round. It was anomalous. It was metallic. There's no way that we can ever figure how it got there. It didn't seem to be recognized as a problem for the brain. It was just there. But that is part of the mystery and part of the reality of these incredibly fascinating and sometimes unnerving bits of technology.
Well, you know, the thing that occurs to me is that with having these objects embedded in your body, and they are obviously metallic, at least as far as we know, because they
silicon based.
Well, but they attract a magnet. Now,
Kate's does.
Yeah, Kate's does.
That's not
right.
always the case.
No, but with Kate, she's going to have to be, you know, cautious throughout her life to avoid any MRI procedures. Because, you know, these magnetic resonance imaging systems are so powerful that even after they're turned off, they're still highly magnetic. I know one time I was in a hospital when I worked in television, and I was videotaping a new MRI device that had been brought in, and I was in a separate room shooting through the window, and this device, when it was turned on, was so powerful, it was actually, for whatever a better word, it was sucking the image out of my viewfinder towards it, because I could see, I mean, in that direction, my image, you know, it looked like it was actually going down a drain towards that machine. So, go ahead.
You know, I just want to ask Kate, how about when you go through the airport? I mean, do you register? I mean, do you go off like a ticking time bomb?
You have no idea how many times I have getting that question. No, I'm just like everyone else when I'm going through the scans.
One of the things that's
interesting, though.
No, one of the things
but
so.
They like to stop me every time, though. I don't know why. Maybe I'm not guilty.
Hey, I didn't steal this question from Kathy. She on Skype wanted to know the same thing that I just asked. I didn't even see that there. But also we have Ryan on Skype. Hey, everybody's on Skype tonight. Ryan wants to know, Kate, have you had any Men in Black experiences?
No, never.
No. Oh, we have
sorry,
to send a couple
guys.
And I who even think that men in black dresses can look nice, but no, not in that way.
And men in any other color outfits.
Yeah.
Oh, and Jeremy, I don't know, did we ask this one, Tim? Jeremy wants to know, are there any scars near the implants?
Yeah, we asked that one.
Oh, we did. Okay, where was
I don't know. Talking with the Men in Black, maybe, Tim.
Possibly. He's trying to set up, going through the airport. That's what the...
Well, we do have, again, a mystery on a mystery here. It has not been fully established that these things are metallic in the way we understand it, and yet those small magnets stick to those spots and only those spots. I have seen it. You move it off half a centimeter one way or the other, and it falls off. I don't understand it. And when Kate, who can answer for herself, of course, has been asked, don't you want to take one out at least and have it examined or something? If it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Yeah. That's for sure.
Boy, don't with that. They are there for a reason.
I tell you, never go to anybody who's going to remove anything from your body if you don't have to, because it isn't gonna do you any darn good, as you probably well know there, Peter. I mean, that's
for me, I think that they're been putting there. They are there for a reason, and since they are symmetrical placed, then I'm not feeling like I don't want to move them. Of course, if I find someone that are not symmetrical placed, then the questions can come up again.
Interesting.
How many do you have?
It was 25, but when right before I was going over to the US, then we find 4 more. So it's actually, 28. No, 29. Yeah, 29. Yeah. My count is a little bit sadly this morning. It's very early in my place. It's almost 6 o'clock in the morning.
Have any of them disappeared?
For me, it looks like that since now this 25, they have been active for a year. But now when we are trying to put them on again because we are going to take new pictures, then suddenly some of them, they were not active anymore. But then that was because, sorry, my English. At that point, then we were starting to look around all the new areas. And then we find the 4 more that hasn't been responding before. So it looks like that someone are active for a certain time, then they are disconnected, and then some new areas are active. So
now, when you say active, what exactly do you mean by that?
That the magnets are sticking to them.
Just the magnets, I see. Now, is there any other outward signs? What's the word that I'm looking for here? Any outward signs of these implants being in your body? Do they react to anything else besides magnets?
No, they don't.
And if I can jump in here, the fact that this is not unique to Kate's case, that upon re-examination, one of these things seems to have a company now, or that it is gone. Perhaps certainly one of the best known instances of this, and it's a case I'm very well informed of, is the so-called Brooklyn Bridge UFO abductions, and a woman named Linda Corteil. A remarkably well-documented and absolutely jaw-dropping case that took up 6 years of Budd Hopkins' time with me, I'm proud to say, doing some of the legwork. And Linda had an implant way up in her sinus cavity. In fact, probably about the same location that my sister Helen had hers. Linda has a cousin who, and this is all published, I'm not talking out of school here, who did radiology work and didn't take Linda's situation terribly seriously, but as a cousin, agreed after hours that she could come in and she would do an X-ray. Well, one of my few regrets about the book Witness is the reproduction of that X-ray in the book fails to capture its detail. It was unlike any implant I've ever seen or been aware of. It almost looked like it had a mechanics to it, almost a little watch spring coming off of it. And Linda's cousin was so upset. I'm sure it was quite mind-blowing for her that it really hurt their relationship after that. Linda immediately decided to have it removed. And the morning of that very local surgery, she got up, a little blood on the pillow. It was gone. It was gone. And it wasn't sneezed out or something. It was simply gone. It had been removed that night. And once again, it's an uncomfortable fact that we are stuck with relative to the story.
Now, concerning the placements of these things on you, Kate, I mean, do they follow any of the like traditional medium points, chi lines, that sort of thing?
Now my English is stopping.
Yeah,
because I don't understand.
The energy meridians that run through the body that are taken advantage of and understood by the ancient procedure of acupuncture, which properly handled is remarkably effective, or the more mystical understanding of energy current through the body. From what I've observed, they're fairly in line with those aspects. They appear in different parts of different people's bodies, and as we're coming in toward the end of the show, after 40 years of research, of investigation on and off into the general phenomena and this aspect in particular, which is where I began and where my deepest interest continues to lie because it involves the lives of real people otherwise living regulation lives, is there's only a limited number of possible explanations for what these things are there for. One could logically assume, as in Kate's case, that they may be there to assist in some way. On the other hand, they may be like little, interdimensional LoJacks that can track you anywhere. They may be involved in a certain aspect of control or influence over the individual, or, as far as I'm concerned, people who say, well, I know why they're there. They should be regarded with a smile and back away slowly while you nod. To say that you know the unknowable for me is an act of intellectual arrogance that I have a problem with. But again, deductive reasoning, logical thinking, critical analysis only limits it to a number of possibilities, and maybe it's different case to case. Also, to compound the mystery, we don't know whether we're dealing with one type of entities or different other intelligences that for their own reasons employ this kind of technology. Also remember that for the past at least 25 years that we know of, these things have been developed and are really quite perfected by human agencies and corporations. I remember the first article I ever read more than 20 odd years ago on implants. It was specifically directed at agricultural communities and farmers and the like. What it was a disc about the size of an American quarter with a battery in it that was surgically implanted with local anesthetic into a slit in the ear of a cow. If the cow would wander off the property to a certain degree, up to a certain, distance, you could track it. Where it is now is much more chilling. They are actually now about the size of a grain of rice, and they're marketed very discreetly in two areas, very 1984, both of them, and I understand the human logic behind them. One is, let's say you're involved in a private prison, or you're a federal individual looking to see how better to control and recover dangerous felons if they escape. If they have one of these in them, the hell with their civil rights. They raped, they murdered, they did whatever, and we're going to get them, and we can track them with this. In the other area, they directed toward individuals of some real financial substance, so much so that their children may be targets for kidnapping. And it's a horrible thing on one level to think, well, I'm going to put this little LoJack in my kid, so if they take off, I'll be able to find him. But that's a logic that I'm forced to respect on a certain level. That technology is here now with us, whether it's been developed on its own or, the legendary idea of back engineering this advanced technology. It's almost a moot point. They have them, and we have variations on them as well.
So, Kate, you feel that they're there to heighten your senses, to connect to the matrix, so to speak?
Yeah, I do. When I'm talking about the GPS system, that is more like for fun. And I think that after all these experiences, I have started to get into areas that I was never into before, and I I'm not even educated for this stuff, but still I'm working on my second book here that are about astrophysics. So it's a big change.
Yeah, speaking of books, we're closing in on the midnight hour here on the East Coast, and the ground crew is ready to come in and sweep us out, or actually maybe it's the air crew in this case. So we want to go around the table. And Kate, tell us the names of your books, where they can be purchased.
I have a website, and my first book will be called A Hybrid's Story. And of course, that's about my life and the process of my life. And yeah, there will be much more.
That's available on Amazon in English?
Not yet.
Not yet. It will be. It will be this fall, this autumn.
Okay.
So,
and your second book will be?
Hopefully it will be done early next year. But of course, there's a lot of drawings and illustrations and a lot of things that need to be put down. So yeah, it takes time.
Oh, it does.
Everyone who has tried to make a book will know it will take time.
And people can find you in the meantime on Facebook.
Or you can just search for my name, and it's Thorvaldsen Kate. Or let me see. I'm so tired. I don't even remember my own website.
Well, as long as you remember your name.
.com. That's my website.
Also, we do have a link on the KCOR page, so people can find you rather easily. And of course, they can always get in touch with me at MrUFO8@hotmail.com. And Peter, where are you appearing?
I'm really excited and privileged to say that next weekend, that is June 17th and 18th, I will be speaking at a unique conference in Athens, Greece. The second.
I want to go.
I know, man. I wish I could put you in a bag and take you with me.
I won't fit in any ordinary bag.
A large bag with holes in it and some food.
There you go. Well, I love Greece. Except if you're walking around though, those cobblestone streets will kind of wear you out after a while.
Well, I know that next week before the conference, I will be visiting the Parthenon, I think, for about the 6th time in my life. And the conference itself, for any of your listeners who more realistically are in Europe or the UK and can join us, is the Contact with Space conference in Athens, 17th and 18th of June. It is a conference that is particularly unique in that it is a scientific conference, not just based in the work of Dr. Wilhelm Reich, which, as you know, is something that's been a part of my life for a long time, but also dealing with the most controversial aspect of his work, his observations, deductions, and conclusions about UFOs. And I'm so pleased that Kate's going to be joining me there next weekend. Going to have a week off after that, and then with a quick stopover in Toronto overnight, I will be speaking at the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, New Mexico, at their superb conference to mark the 70th anniversary of the Roswell event. The conference is June 30th through July 2nd. It's one of 3 conferences going on that weekend in Roswell, and I hope that I'll be seeing some of your listeners there.
Oh boy, you get to travel the world.
Well, and sometimes, yeah. Other times I sit here and look at my computer screen and wonder when somebody will hire me to speak again.
Well, there you go. I want to thank both of you for being on. Kate, you're a very pleasant person to speak to. You have some great information. We're going to follow your case. And Peter, we're always on top of whatever it is that you're doing. I don't know if that came out right. And Tim Swartz there in Jasper, Indiana, will be talking to you very shortly. And thanks for tuning in. And talk to you next week. And don't forget to go to Mr. UFO Secret Files on YouTube. Good night.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.